Evening, hope you're all doing well. Starting at a fresh Mishnah on the bottom of Yud Daled Amud Beis. Tonight we're going to be learning Maseches Kesubos Tes Vav and Tes Zayin Amud Aleph. We'll be stopping 4 lines from the bottom of Tes Zayin Amud Aleph, and we will be continuing on Shabbos with Tes Zayin Amud Beis and Daf Yud Zayin. Baruch Hashem, tonight we're going to be finishing the first perek. We've already learned more than 10% of this Masechta. How long is this Masechta? Let me check. 120s? Not even. 112. Well, we're well more than that. We're maybe even 15%. Says the new Mishnah. 8-9 lines from the bottom of Yud Daled Amud Beis. The new Mishnah reads, Amar Rav Yossi Ma'aseh betinokes sheyardim lamalos mayim min ha'ayin v'ne'ensa. Story of a tinokes, a young girl, who went down to go fill up a pitcher of water by the ayin. Rashi explains it's not an ayin, it's a ma'ayan. So interesting why the language is the way that it is. V'ne'ensa, and she was violated. Amar Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, imrov anshe ha'ir masin lekahuna. If most of the men in that community that had they violated a woman could still be married to the kahuna, harezu tinase the kahuna, then this girl as well can do that. If you take a look at Rashi here, Rashi gives us a little bit more of what's going on. 3 lines from the bottom of the page, Rashi says, if most people are able to marry their daughters to a kohen, so then she'ein rov bnei ha'ir min ha'psulen. Then Isha, min hapsulin Isha lekahuna bebiyasan avzu tinase lekahuna. So then this woman as well would be able to. This girl, when she was violated as a tinokes, could still marry in. So that's what the Mishnah says is our case. The girl who was never violated at the Ma'ayan. Amar le Rava le Rav Nachman. Rava says to Rav Nachman, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri to Amar Kiman. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who does he hold like? The condition and the psak don't make sense. The psak was that she's muteres to a kohen, but the condition doesn't fit because the condition says only if there's rov ksherim. That's not Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel is the psak without the condition. Rabban Gamliel says she's ne'emenes, or in general he says that she's ne'emenes, even without the rov. So why over here does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri need a rov if we're like Rabban Gamliel? And Ika Rabbi Yoshua. Well, then Rabbi Yoshua, the psak is wrong, who says, Afilu berov ksherim, nami pasel. So, manavshach, this answer doesn't fit with the previous themed shitas of Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. So, Amar le, Rav Nachman responds back to Rabba, let me tell you what Rav Yochanan ben Nuri was thinking. And the Gemara says, Amar le, hachi Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav. He says, what are we talking about here? Bekronos shel tzipori. We're talking about where there was caravans in Sipori. This is the story that took place when this girl was violated. So Rashi at the bottom of Yud Daled Amud Beis, the last Rashi says, La'olam Kareb Yoshua. And really the halacha is that we're going to say she's mutter, but Rabbi Yoshua doesn't usually say she's mutter. So there's a uniqueness here that makes Rabbi Yoshua say she's mutter. What's that? That in addition to the city being rov ksherim, there also was kronos shel tzipori. There was a second rov, as we'll see in a moment. Uched Rav Ami, top of Tes Vav Amud Aleph, top line. When there is the second rov, that's what Rashi says on the second line. We have 2 rovs in place right now. Rov of the people who live in the city are ksherim, and even of the visitors, rov of those people are also ksherim. So there, even though Rabbi Yoshua otherwise would have said she would be problematic, here he's going to be lenient because there's 2 rovs. And the Gemara says, Uchede Rav Yanai, 3 lines down, to Amar Rav Yanai, Niveles bekronos ksher lekahuna, that if a woman was violated in the kronos, in the caravans, in one of the chariots, so then she's still ksher lekahuna. Asks the Gemara just a logistical, technical question. Bekronos al kadaitach, a woman can't possibly be violated like that at Bekronos. She's being violated. There's people around. It's not like a normal climate. If we're saying these people are ksherim, there's no possible way the ksherim would be onlookers to such a crime. So it says the Gemara, of course, that's not what we meant. Ela niveles b'shas kronos ksher lekahuna. That if at the time when the kronos were visiting that city, so then we have the double rov. We have a rov that the city is rov ksherim, and we have a rov that most of the visitors are also ksherim, and because we have that, so that double rov motivates Rabbi Yoshua to break protocol and to say that he therefore will be lenient in our Mishnah. So our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yoshua, or I should say Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yoshua. And then says the Gemara to close off this answer with a neat little bow, Haval piresh echad mitzipori uvaal havlat shtuki. But had it been that one person from Tzipori had separated himself, so then the Vlad is a shtuki. Why is that the case? Why would it be that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and Rabbi Yoshua would say that if one man separates himself from the pack, he didn't violate her within the city limits, he violated her outside of the city limits. So then says the Gemara that the child's a shtuki. Why? What happened to our double rove? So Rashi explains this for us. Rashi is 10 lines down. Dibra Maskal Havlad Shtuki. He's no longer part of the shiur. He's no longer part of the caravans. So the only time Rabbi Yoshua / Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri would be mekel is when there's a double rove, and there is no double rove here anymore because this person separated himself from the pack. And in fact, this idea has a raya brura to it. We are 7 lines down. Tesvav Merala. Kiha dechi ase Rav Dimi Amar Zeiri Amar Reb Chanina. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael, he said in the name of Zeiri, who said in the name of Reb Chanina. Ve'amrila, some say it was Amar Zeiri Amar Reb Chanina. Either way, whoever the author was of this line, what did they say? A very difficult line to understand. The Gemara is going to be bothered by it. Holchen achar rov ha'ir. We do follow the majority of a city. Ve'ein holchen achar rov sia. However, we don't follow the majority of a sia, of the transports, of the caravans. Says the Gemara, klape laya. Klape laya is a language in the Gemara of shock and dismay. What is going on here? That makes absolutely no sense. Hani naide, v'hane kviye v'kaime. These are portable, namely the people in the caravan are movable. They're constantly on the move. V'hane kviye v'kaime. The people who live here are kavua. So what is this talking about? So we've had this idea once before, and we're going to be spending much more time on it today. And this is an idea in Hilchos Ta'aroves and found primarily here and a couple of other places in Shas, of a principle called kavua. And the principles of kavua work like this. And we're going to see examples of this in the Gemara. When something has a fixed location, even if the numbers indicate majority, we don't look at it that way. We then say that its kavua is kemechza al mechza. So even though most of the city is going to be Jews, that may be, but kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. Even though it's 90-10 in math, when something happens in that fixed place, so then that is considered to be kavua, and kavua is kemechza al mechza dami. So it shouldn't have been that we follow rov when it comes to the ear. What did Rab Chanina say? We follow the rov of the city. We shouldn't be following the rov of the city. The city's a kavua. And then you're going to say we don't follow the rov of the sia. The sia is the caravan that's portable. That's specifically where we should have the majority. So it says the Gemara, you're right. When is it that we follow the rov of a city? Because a city shouldn't have a rov. The city shouldn't have a rov because it's kavua. People live in their homes. So because that city is kavua, it should be kemechza al mechza dami. So the Gemara breaks its own rule. When do we say that we follow the rov of the city? Says the Gemara, when there's a second rov. We do not follow the majority of either the city or the caravans when they're on their own, because in regards to the city, it would be called kavua kemechza al mechza dami. So we need the combo deal. It says the Gemara, my taima. Why is it that after the majority of the sia, the majority of the caravans, why wouldn't that work? That's not kavua. We should have regular rules of rov. Says the Gemara, gzeira rov sia atu rov ha'ir. We have to be makbid on the caravan to say that we are not going to rely on a rov, and we're going to be machmir about it because of the rov of the city. And the rov of the city is unreliable because when it's a city, the city is considered kavua. And says the Gemara, "V'rov ha'ir nami." Even when we talk about the majority of a city, if somebody leaves his home to be with this woman, then he's no longer kavua. Kavua means you're in your place, and if this guy is in his place, then he's kemechza al mechza. But if he leaves his house to be with this woman, so then says the Gemara, then we no longer say that it's 50-50, that it's kavua. Rather, we say kol de parish meruba parish. Rabbi Resnick gave a beautiful example to articulate the difference between these two things. He said, if you have a gumball machine and you put in a quarter and you turn the knob and a gumball comes out and you look at that and the machine's covered, you can't see what's inside. So then we would say, kol de parish meruba parish. We would say, most likely, the gumball that has come out of this machine is like whatever the majority is inside the machine. So let's say that there's 90 gumballs of one color and 10 gumballs of another. Statistically, we could paskin, as it were, on the gumball that it's the color of the majority. However, says the Gemara, when we put our hand inside the gumball machine, and not that the gumball is separating itself, then we have a halachic logic. It's not a mathematical logic. The mathematical logic would dictate that if you grab one from within the container or turn the knob and let the ball fall out of the container, that it should be the same ball. Statistically, at 9 out of 10, it's going to be the blue instead of the white. That's true. But halachically speaking, that doesn't work. And we're going to see a little bit more about where we learn the principle of kavua from. But when something is in a fixed place, we say kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. And when something separates itself from the pack, then we say kol de parish meruba parish, that this thing is from the majority. And these halachic principles are employed in detail in Shulchan Aruch, in the halachos of Tarobis. For sure, one of the hardest, probably the hardest bechina, for at least for me, that I took in Smicha. I think I got in the 70s on that one. Don't ask many questions about it. That was a very hard test. There was these very complex, multi-layered shilas about mixtures, and do we say kavua, and do we say kol de parish? So kavua, when do we say kol kavua is kemechza mechza? That's when something is fixed in place. And the kol kavua, anything that's in a fixed place, we don't care about the number of those fixed places. We don't care that the city's majority Jewish. If everyone's at home, then it's kol kavua kemechza mechza dami, anything that's fixed in place. So then we look at the statistics of that community as 50-50. However, if somebody separates themselves from their community, so then we look at them as called a parish meruba parish, that we then assume that this person is part of the majority. So when we're fixed at home, it's 50-50, even though the numbers don't look that way. We treat it as 50-50. And when we're separated from home, then we look at it as rov, whatever the rules are. So it says the Gemara, I don't understand. When it comes to V'rov ha'ir, if the man were to leave his house to go be with the woman, then we no longer have the rules of kavua. Rather, we have the rules of called a parish meruba parish, and that's not true. So it says the Gemara, you're right. Lo tzricha, third of the way down on Tes Vav Amud Aleph, to ka'azla ihi legabayhu to have kavua. She went to his house, and in such a case, there's kavua, and that's why our Mishnah is following the principles of kavua and not the principles of rov. The Amar Reb Zera called kavua kemechza al mechza dami. The reason why our Mishnah needs a double rov to be lenient, which is Rabbi Yoshua, the reason why we hold that way is because our Mishnah is a case of kemechza al mechza. It's a case of kavua. Says the Gemara, does our Mishnah really, in fact, require two rovs in order to allow the woman to remain a kshera? After all, the Gemara says, nearing the halfway mark on Tes Vav Amud Aleph, we have a brisa. Tesha chanuyos, there are 9 stores. Kulan mochros, basar shchuta, ve'achas mocheres, basar nevela. 9 stores sell basar shchuta, they sell kosher meat. Ve'achas mocheres, basar nevela, and one sells treif, unshechted meat. Ve'lokach me'achas mehen ve'eno yodea me'ezeh lokach. Me'ezeh mehen lokach. So this guy, just imagine you're in a food court in a mall. And there's 10 butchers, 9 of them are Jewish and 1 of them is not. So if you take 9 of them, what should the din be? Do we say that it's kavua, that it's fixed? Or do we say that it's regular rules of rov? So according to the rules of kavua, because the restaurants are all fixed in place, because the butchers are established establishments, so therefore we have no choice but to say it's kemechza al mechza, and therefore the Gemara says, sfeiko aser. If we have these 10 stores in a food court and I find a piece of meat, I'm not allowed to eat it. What about majority? Majority doesn't rule when it's kavua. Because the stores are kavua, so therefore kavua is kemechza al mechza, and therefore you're not allowed to eat the meat. However, says the Gemara, uvenimtza, if you found the meat in a random place in the mall, not in the food court, it's been separated from that kavua place. It's no longer in the food court. So then uvenimtza, then halach achararo. It's a huge nafkamina. You find it, you're in the store. Let's say you walked up to the counter. You weren't looking. You walk up to the counter and you buy a piece of meat. You're not looking. And then you take the meat. You're about to open it. You're like, which store did I just go to? And you turn around and you look, and there's 9 kosher and 1 treif. The halacha is the meat is 50-50. You're not allowed to eat it. However, that same piece of meat, had you found it down the hall next to Old Navy, mutter, because it's rov. So these are the principles that are difficult to understand. So the Gemara says, what do we see from here? We see sveiko aser, and if you find it elsewhere, then we apply the rules of rov. So therefore, the Gemara says, it doesn't seem that we need to have 2 rovs in order to be lenient. Because what does it seem to say? So says the Gemara, and if you want to say b'she'ein dalsos medina neulos, maybe we're talking about a community where the doors are open, and there really is a second rov. That's not the case, because amar Reb Zera afal pisha dalsos medina neulos. Even if the doors had been locked to the community, so then still we would have had the same halacha, even though there's only 1 rov. So that's a good question. So the Gemara then responds, how do we know that we need 2 rovs in order to be matir in our case? The Gemara responds, we have a stricter line, we have a stricter level of standard when it comes to yuchsin. What does this answer mean? It means that when it comes to our Gemara, our Mishnah that we started with on the bottom of Yudalad Amud Beis. We said there was Nebuch, a young girl who was violated, and we want to know, is she still kosher to kahuna? The Gemara develops this idea from Rav Yochanan ben Nuri and connecting it to Rav Yoshua, that really what we're saying is that this case is a case of kavua. Kavua typically is a case of mechsa mechsa, and really it should be usher. However, because there's two roves, we have rov ha'ir, and we also have the rov of the caravans, so therefore we're going to be lenient. But why did we have such a high standard? Why do we need two roves in this case? So the Gemara responds, because what's going on in our Mishnah is a case of yuchsin. We don't mess around with yuchsin. We don't mess around with lineage. I can tell you as a Moel, people are messing around with their lineage. They have no clue what's going on. Even the most simple case scenario of this person not being a yid, forget about yuchsin, zir masusim, zir masam. Like at least the baby's a yid, but he has no masora in Klal Yisrael. And all of these cases of women who are getting pregnant in their early 40s because their clock is ticking and they go to a sperm bank. What about yuchsin? What about yuchsin? These are big problems. So the Gemara says, because we're so makpid on yuchsin, we needed a very high standard in order to get out of this unfortunate scenario that this girl is in. And the way we got out of it is, yes, it's kavua kemechza al mechza dami. That's true. However, the way to get out of it is by having a double rov. So this is like why, again, we're going to see this on almost every daf. This is why this Masechta is called Shas Katan. Do you know how many halachic phrases we are using? You've got kavua, you've got rov, and you've got kahuna going on here, and you've got Yevamos stuff with violations of young children, and she's iktana. Will the besulim come back? Will it not come back? How much is iksu? There's such an interweave of sugyas here. It's hard to hold cup on all of them. It really is. It's difficult, but this is what the Gemara says up until now, and that ends sugya number 1 for tonight. We're halfway down on Tes Vav Amud Aleph. Let's hyperanalyze this idea that we've been talking about. Gufa. Gufa always means to quote something that we've just previously learned and to analyze it. What did we just learn? Not only do we have a principle that when something is fixed in place, that we no longer look at the numbers and math, but rather we look at the halachic reality that it's 50-50. That's true both lekula and lechumra. So says the Gemara, how do we know that the principle of kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami is employed both leniently and stringently? So the Gemara says as follows. If you want to try and learn from the case of the 9 stores that we're both lenient and strict, by kavua, that can't be, because what was the case there? We said kulan mochros basar shkuta ve'achas basar nevela. There were many stores that sold kosher meat and one that sold non-kosher meat. He doesn't know what he did. We said sveiko aser. Okay, we see the chumrah. What's the rest of that brisa that we had seen already? That uvenimtza halach achar harov, and therefore we don't see a case that's lenient at all. In the case of kavua, which was that first case where they found it in the store, where he bought it from the store, hasam l'chumrah, that's only a case of chumrah. So okay, granted, I understand how you can find the case of kavua, that kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. I see how you can be stringent, I see how you can be strict, but where do we see a leniency that is applied from the world of kavua? So the Gemara poses a second possibility, 2/3 of the way down. We know that certain animals have a significant level of tumah. They're referred to as the shmona shratzim. 8 certain shratzim have a very high level of tumah. Frogs are shratzim that don't have this high level of tumah. So let's say that you had a mixture of animals. 9 of them are frogs, which don't have this high level of tumah, and 1 is a very high level tumah sheretz. We don't know which one you touched. What's the din? Sveiko tame. Why? Because kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. Are we being lenient or strict here? We're being very strict. So says the Gemara, hasam nami l'chumra. The case of the frogs, that case is also a case where yes, we have kavua and we apply the rules of kemechza al mechza. That's why we're strict, sveiko tame. However, what we don't have is a kula. So we're still searching for an application of the principle of kavua, kemechza mechza dami, where we're lenient. The Gemara then tries with the third possibility. Ella, maybe it's mitisha shratzim utzvardea echad benein. Maybe it's 9 animals that have a high level of tumah and 1 frog that has a low level of tumah. And in such a case, the naga be'echad mehen beinei yodeh be'ezem hen naga. And then you touched it, but we don't know, says the Gemara. We don't know which one you touched. So what's the din? So says the Gemara, and here we are going back to Maseches Eruvin, Maseches Shabbos, some old principles in halacha. Again, Shas Katan, Birshus HaYachid. When it comes to a Rishus HaYachid, Sveiko Tameh. As a general rule, when we have a suffix by tuma or in Rishus HaYachid, we're machmir. And Birshus Harabim, Sveiko Tahor. So the Gemara has now found its lenient application of Kavua Kemechza al Mechza Dami. Let's say the case out. The question we asked is, how do we know that according to Reb Zera, when we say Kavua is Kemechza al Mechza, that it's also true Lakula? And the Gemara says we have a case where there's 9 shratzim that are tmeim, 9 of the 9 shratzim, each of which are of the shmona shratzim. So you can't say 9 shmona shratzim. That doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says we have 9 animals, each of which are of the shmona shratzim. And the halacha is that we only have only 1 frog. So we say there that there's a suffix, a big suffix. It's 1 to 9 odds that you're not tummy. But the Gemara says that when we have a suffix on tuma, b'rishus harabim, we're mekel. So that's where we see the leniency. How do we know where this principle comes from? I think I wanted to show you a Rashi here, no? No. Okay, and where do we see this principle from? Amar Kra, because the pasuk reads, Arav lo v'kamalav, that he attacked him and he killed him. So says the Gemara, you're not really going to be held fully liable for a murder when you're attacking someone, unless you specifically intended to kill person X. But if you intended to kill person Y, so then the consequence is different. Jewish law is quite nuanced. Secular law has similar iterations. Is it manslaughter? Is it murder? First degree murder, second degree murder? All of them with their own parameters. So here the Gemara is saying that according to this shita, unless you have specific intent to kill person X, so let's say in a gang war, I'm planning on killing person X that goes through a wall and kills person Y. Totally different ballgame. The person still died. I'm not saying it isn't, but your intentions play a very big role. The Rabbanan who disagree with this Tanakama, where the Tanakama says Ashi Iskaben lo, Amre Debe Rav Yanai, they say the drush is different. Prat Lazorik Evan Lago. That's if a person just picks up a rock and throws it into a group of people and someone dies. That in that case you're not going to be held accountable. But if you tried to kill person X and instead you killed person Y, you would be liable. Hey Chidami, what is the case? So says the Gemara as follows. 10 lines from the bottom. Ilema de ikatisha kinaanim or goyim. Different language. What do you have in the regular Gemaras there? It's we're 10 lines from the bottom. Hechidami. Ilema de ikatisha. What's the next word? Kinaanim or goyim? Okay. It says kinaanim in mine, but it has a quote on the side to turn it into goyim. And the Tfusim Yishanim. This was probably from the censors over the years. There were a few changes that stayed into our text. Okay. Ilema de ikatisha kinaanim ve'echad Yisrael b'neihem. Maybe we can just say that there's a majority of people over there, and that's why we would hold the way that we do. Inami palga upalga. Even if you want to say that it's palga upalga, that doesn't work either because safek nefashas lahakel. We would never punish the murderer, even if he's an accidental murderer. It's palga upalga. We have a rule that when we are done dine nefashos, that we need to have a separation of 2 people in Bezdin in order to kill. We need a more noticeable majority. So none of these cases can be it. Lo tzricha, says the Gemara. What is the case where we see that the Rabbanan hold prat lezorik evan lego? What is that case? Lo tzricha v'katisha Yisrael v'kanani echad beinehem. There's 9 yidden and 1 goy. Tahavale Kanani kavua. The Kanani himself is a kavua. That was his house, whatever the case may be. V'chol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. And therefore we see midoraisa that we have this principle of kol kavua kemechza al mechza dami. So Lemaisa, what do we learn from our Mishnah? Says the Gemara at the very bottom of Tesvav and Aleph, Itmar, Reb Chia bar Ashi Amar Itmar. Reb Chia bar Ashi Amar Rab, halacha ki Reb Yossi. We paskin like this Mishnah about Reb Yossi, namely that our Mishnah had said in the name of Reb Yossi, who then quoted Reb Yochanan ben Nuri, that even though it's a case of kavua, and even though kol kavua is kemechza al mechza dami, but still because we have shtei rube, we have 2 roves in this case. One is the rove of the city, and one is the rove of the caravans that were there. We're allowed to be lenient on this girl who was violated as a child because of the double rove. We allow her to marry in. The Rav Chanan bar Rava Omar Rav, no, horas shah haisa. It was only a horas shah. It wasn't a regular psak halacha. So that's really the discussion in these few lines: is what is the nature of our Mishnah? Is our Mishnah run-of-the-mill, regular, everyday halacha, or is it like COVID halacha? Like things are different. So now the gabbai, now we don't need any gabbayim by the tables anymore. Now, do we touch the Torah handles? So those are all dinim b'di'evet. I'm not just speaking sweepingly. There's a lot of dinim b'di'evet that we relied upon. We davened at home. Ladina, you should die. Yeah, you should. Okay, it's din b'di'evet. So is this Mishnah horas shah? Is this Mishnah unique? or is this Mishnah for year round? So that's what the Gemara says is a discussion between Rav Chia bar Ashi on the one side, in the name of Rav, who says that we do hold like Rav Yossi year round, and Rav Chanan bar Abba Amar Rav says it's Horas Shahaisa. Says Rashi, 2 lines from the bottom, Horas Shahaisa, Hach Rav Yochanan ben Nuri Tzorach Shahaisa. We really do need Trey Reuben for many generations. And then the Gemara asks a question. Rashi says out of the gates that he misunderstood what was going on. Rav Yirmiyah wasn't really aware of what was going on here. He made an error. Masiv Rav Yirmiyah Trey Reuben. He misunderstood the shita of Rav, is what Rashi says. He's asking on Rav, how can you say that we don't need 2 rows in order to allow her to marry if we're dealing with Yuchsin? After all, the Hatnan, turning to the top of Daf Tes Vav Amud Beis. So after all, how can you say we don't need 2 rows? The Mishnah writes on the top of Tes Vav Amud Beis, Matzah Batinok Mushlach. We have these safe haven rules. They find a baby, and the baby was mushlach, he was cast aside. So how do we view this child? Is he a yid or is he not a yid? Says the Gemara. Im rov ovdei kochavim. If we find him in a city where most people are goyim, then oved kochavim, then he's treated like a goyim. Im rov Yisrael. If it's going to be a community like Williamsburg, whatever, so then in that case, Yisrael. And mechza al mechza, if mamish 50%, says the Gemara, then that child is considered a Yisrael. Now, what does Rav say about this? All this means is that we have a burden to keep him alive. However, aval yuchsin lo, he is not halachically a yid based on 1 rov, which means we need 2 rovs. Not only that, Ushmuel Amar only lefakech alav esagal. This only conversation is: are we allowed to be mechalel Shabbos if a building falls on this child? How far do we go? But to say that the child is a full yid, we're not ready to say that. We're not ready to say that he's a full yid based on rov. Think about that. Would you want your daughter to marry this boy who was found on the doorstep in a community that was 80% Jewish? Statistically speaking, with no evidence against it, there's an 8 in 10 chance that that child is a Jew. No, you're going to say go jump in the mikvah, and you're going to say go get a bris, and you're going to say Kabbalah, you got to do a whole gerus. But the Gemara says that if there was only 1 rov, you're right, we would not trust that person is Jewish. The haraya that we see from here that we need 2 rovs, says the Gemara, obviously Rav Yirmiyah misunderstood Rav, because ishtimitse hada amar Rabbi Yehuda amar Rav b'krono shel tzipori habamaisa. Rav Yirmiyah obviously didn't see the initial comment that we saw to touch up our Mishnah. When we learned our Mishnah over here on the bottom, we asked a question. We said, Rav Yochanan ben Nuri, who is he like? He doesn't align with Rabban Gamliel or with Rabbi Yoshua. And we said he's really like Rabbi Yoshua, and there's 2 rovs. That was Rav. Rav said on the top of that page, Rav on the very bottom line of Yadalim and Beis going to Tes Vav Amud Aleph said that we're talking about 2 rovs. So obviously Rav Yirmiyah missed what was going on. And the Gemara leaves it at that. And then one last question in this little sugya, and that'll bring us to our next sugya, which is 6 lines down, 7 lines down, Tes Vav Amud Beis. Rav Chanan bar Rava the Amar Horas Shah Kasha. According to Rav Chanan bar Abba, who says that really it was a Horas Shah, and really it shouldn't be that way. So then this Mishnah of the Tinok Mushlach doesn't align with his Shita. And the Gemara responds, you're right. Man de masniha, lo masniha. Don't worry, it's not really a stira. It's 2 different Shitas. They're different authors. Let's discuss the case now of the Tinok Mushlach. Says the Gemara, quarter of the way down on Tes Vav Amud Beis, heading to the end of the parak. Gufa, matzah batinok mushlach, we had said that if the baby was found in a place where im rov ovdei kochavim oved kochavim, and then we said im rov Yisrael, the baby would be a yid if he was born in a community that's Jewish. Mechza al mechza, if he's born in a community that's 50-50, so then we treat the baby like a Yisrael. And we had said earlier, like we're saying again, that's only true to keep him alive. We're obligated to feed him. We're obligated to make sure that he's sustained. But to say that he's a yid and he can marry our children is not correct. And the only din that we're talking about is whether or not we can save him. So it says the Gemara, something's off with Shmuel. Is it correct? Think about this. We find this baby. If the city's mostly goyim, we treat him like a goyim. And what does Shmuel say? The only thing we're talking about here is can we save him on Shabbos? What if there's a 1% chance that baby's a yid? So he's born in a community of all goyim. The safe haven rule: baby's dropped off at a hospital, and he happens to be fostering in the home of a yid. So then there comes Chil Shabbos. If it's Pikuach Nefashos, whatever the case may be, is he allowed to be Mechal Shabbos for the baby? Is a total goy? Yes or no? So the Shmuel doesn't make sense. Amar Shmuel Hachi, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ein Holchen bePikuach Nefesh Achar Harov. We don't use rov to determine Pikuach Nefesh. I hate to be one. That's why shuls needed to close down. There's a 1% chance that someone could die. There's a 0.5% chance that someone can die because of COVID. Close the shuls. That was like the whole hack about Safek Pikuach Nefashos. That's why a lot of shuls close down very, very quickly, because if there's a Safek Pikuach Nefashos, you don't mess around. We don't look at rov when it comes to Pikuach Nefashos. We look at the minority. So says the Gemara, we don't even understand how this is possible that Shmuel would say that if the baby was born in a community, if he was put in a safe haven hospital, which was mostly goyim, that we don't violate Shabbos from him. Of course we violate Shabbos from him. Ella, you're right. Says the Gemara, you're 100% correct. Shmuel would never say such a thing. Halfway down to Tesvav Midbeis, Ella, ki itmar de Shmuel aresh itmar. He was talking about a different din. How does it play out? Like this. On the Reisha line of im rov ovdei kochavim, on that Amar Shmuel ulefakech alav esagal enokein. The opposite is that if the baby's born in a community and we say, oh, most of the people are goyim, the baby must be a goy. Shmuel teaches and says, yeah, he's a goy, but not as it relates to this. As it relates to Hilchos Shabbos, we violate Shabbos to save this baby, 100%. Imrov ovdei kochavim. If that's true, then what does the line of Imrov ovdei kochavim mean according to everybody else? We understand what it means according to Shmuel. Ovdei kochavim. What does it mean? Says Gemara, Lamai Hilchos Amar Papa lahachilo nevelos. That it's mutter to feed that child nevelos. Oh, say there. So you don't have to give him the expensive Romanian meat. You can give him across the aisle at Jewel, the one a little bit further back. It's 10 feet apart, and it's Nisr D'Oraisa to eat. That the kid can eat, no problem at all. That's fine. In Rov Yisrael, my Hilchasa. What then is the din of Rov Yisrael? If the baby's born in Williamsburg and then he's a safe haven baby, what should we do? So we said that's only lahachzir lo aveda. Amar Papa lahachzir lo aveda. That if in fact this child lost something, okay, maybe we won't let him marry our children. We won't let him marry our daughters. However, lahachzir lo aveda, we do have the mitzvah of hashavas aveda to give back to him. What about the case of Mechza Yisrael? Mechza Yisrael my Hilchasa. So if it's half and half, we call him a Yisrael for what purposes? Amaresh Lakish Lanizakin. That's true for the halachos of Nezikin. We'll get to Nezikin soon. Avos, Bavakama, all the Bavos will get there. Says the Gemara, Hechidami. What is the case over here of Nezikin? Nema denagche Torah didan leTorah didei. If one of our animals was to gore one of his animals, so Lema Le will say to him, I see Raya Yisrael Adushkol. Prove to me that you're a yid, and then I'll give you money. But if you're not a yid, I don't know you money. Lo tzricha. What then is the case? Says the Gemara, denagche Torah didei the Torah didan. His animal gored one of our animals. Palga mishalim. He's always going to have to pay half under those circumstances. V'idach palga, and for the other half, Amar lahu, the person who's a safe haven baby is going to say, Amar lahu, I see right. Dolav Yisrael ana. If you can prove to me that I'm not a yid, and I'll give you the rest of the money. So that's what the Gemara says, is that when this Bryce is speaking about a case of mechza al mechza, what that means is that he doesn't necessarily have to pay everything if his animal gores one of ours. Hadran alach b'sulani says, Baruch Hashem, we finished the first parak of Maseches Kesubos. Yiratzon that we should be zochet to come back to this page in 7.5 years. The Beis Hamikdash standing. Oh, I forgot. We're learning tonight Ilu Nishmas, your grandfather? Yeah, Chaim Yoshua ben Yosef Chaim. Yiratzon the neshama should have an aliyah. So the new parak opens. This is parak Ha'isha Shenis Armala, and those are the starting words. Ha'isha Shenis Armala o Shenis Karsha, a woman who became widowed or divorced. He omeres, she says, Besula Nisasani. I married when I was a basula. Who omer loki ela almana nisasich. You married as an almana. You were already had tashmish hamita. Im yesh edim sheyatas behinuma uvirosha parua ksuvas masayim. If prior to marriage we saw that she was walking outside behinuma, we're going to learn tomorrow what a hinuma is. I believe it's tomorrow. And virosha parua, that she wasn't covering her hair, because we know the dina that a woman must cover her hair. Ksuvas masayim. We treat her then like a basula because she was behaving like a basula. Obviously, that's not true in a community where people don't cover their hair. And the previous generation, many women didn't cover their hair, even of great Rabbanim Chashulim, a lot of women didn't cover their hair. So in that generation, it's different. But in a generation where everyone covers their hair, so then when you see a woman who's not covering her hair, that's a raya brura that she's not married, and presumably a basula. Rav Yochanan ben Baruch Omer av chiluk kalayos raya. Even the handing out of kleos, they look at societal norms, contextual societal norms. If they're handing out candies that were only handed out when a woman was a basula, great, givaldik. She must be that when she got married, she was a basula. And then the Gemara says a line. We have to figure out what this means. Umode Rabbi Yeshua agrees to what we just said. Be'omer lechavero sadezu shel avicha haisa ulekachtia hemenu shu neman. Rabbi Yeshua says that meaning he agrees that if the logic of the previous case would be applied here, then he would agree that had it been that a man said to his friend, let's say, I say to my friend Chaim, this field really belonged to your father, Haisa, and I bought it from him, so the halacha is that I'm neman. Why? And talk about a Shas concept, top of Tezayin Amar Aleph, Sha'apesha Asar, Hu HaPesha Hitir. If it is my mouth that assered something, then it can also be my mouth that is going to be matir something, because I never had to say the first thing in the first place. If I'm willing to go out on a ledge and say, I really didn't own this, it belonged to your father, and then step two, I bought it from him. So migo, I could have said nothing. I could have just said it's my field, and I would have been right. So by virtue of the fact that I said pesha asar, therefore pesha hitir. So she could have said the same thing. Okay, fine. Let's get into the rest of this Mishnah, and then we'll learn the Gemara. V'im yesh edim shehi shel aviv. If there were edim that really the field is of the father, v'hu amar lekachtia hemenu einu ne'aman. So the edim don't work. Edim and then him saying he owns it is not the same as pesha asar pesha hitir. So if I say the field is mine, and if I say the field was your father's, but I bought it from him, we believe it. If there are edim that the field belonged to the father, and then I said the field belongs to me, that's not the case, because that's not pesha asar pesha hitir. Says the Gemara, the only reason why this woman in the ratio of our Mishnah, when she says that she was a basula nesasani, is because there were edim. However, says the Gemara, had there not been edim, the husband would have been ne'aman, and it would have been the kesuba would have been very problematic. Lema, says the Gemara, lema tnan stama deloka Rabban Gamliel. If that's true, that when there's no edim, we don't believe her and we believe him, so that is against the theme that we've been seeing over the last many blot, that Rabban Gamliel is correct, because this Mishnah seems to not be like Rabban Gamliel. To Rabban Gamliel, ha'amar ihi mehemna. Rabban Gamliel would have said that she is believed in such a case. So the Gemara responds, that's not correct. Our Mishnah could even be like the Shita of Rabban Gamliel. 8 lines down, Tezayin Madal. Afilu tema Rabban Gamliel. Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabban Gamliel hasam ela bebari v'shema. When is it that Rabban Gamliel is always lenient? That's in a case where the two claims that are present, one is bari and one is shema. One's a definite, confident claim, and the other is a weak claim. However, aval hacha, in the case that we're dealing with over here, it's bibari lo amar. There, Rabban Gamliel, in our Mishnah that we're dealing with over here, where she speaks with confidence that Basula Nisasani, and he says, Loki, that's not correct. He's also speaking with confidence. So if both tainas come in confidently, that's not where Rabban Gamliel would be Mekel. So says the Gemara, that's such a good answer that I don't even understand why the question was asked. The karila, my karila, habarihu barihu. You're right, absolutely. What a great answer. When does Rabban Gamliel say his answer that we always believe her? That's bari v'shema. Okay, that's when she makes a solid claim and he makes a terrible claim. Okay, of course we're going to believe her, obviously. But when they're both bari claims, so of course Rabban Gamliel wouldn't say that. What were you even asking? So says the Gemara, we're going to weave in one other thing that made us think a little bit differently. Kevan de berov nashim besulos nisos. Since most women, when they get married, they're besulos, so then maybe kibari v'shema dami. Maybe her claim is perfect and his claim is actually particularly weak, even though it sounds like a good claim. What does he say? You slept with someone, but she has a chazaka that she's a basula. So then what do the scales look like? She says, I am a basula. He says, no, you're not. And they're both confident. So that's bari v'bari. Says the Gemara, really not so. She says, I'm a basula. He says, you're not a basula, but going against him is her chazaka. So then the scales are heavier in her favor. So then that's why the Gemara says that this case might be different. We might have thought that sorry, I lost my place here. Oh yeah. So Kevan de berov nashim basulos nisos kibari v'shema dami. I might have thought that was the case. So that's what the Gemara says, is that we could even say that it's like Rabban Gamliel. And the Havamina was that maybe we would have made a distinction about adding in her chazaka against his claim, and we don't do that. Says the Gemara, v'hachanami mistabra. It's actually very logical to assume that the Resha of our Mishnah is like Rabban Gamliel. Why? Because what does the Seifa say? Midikatani umo de Rabbi Yoshua. What a beautiful raya. The Gemara has been telling us over the last many blot that we have this long-standing machlokas Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua. Rabban Gamliel, by and large, trusts a woman's psak, and it's certainly in the case of Bari B'Sheva. Rabbi Yoshua doesn't. So we have the Reisha. We struggled to determine if it was Rabban Gamliel or not. We said, yeah, we could still explain it. That way, says the Gemara, I know that it's talking about Rabban Gamliel. Because look at the last three lines on Tes Vav Amud Beis. Umode Rabbi Yoshua. So says the Gemara, we see that Rabbi Yoshua is a perfect person. Tani Rabbi Yoshua. Yamris Bishlama Iri Rabban Gamliel B'Mode Shapir. Then I understand. If Rabban Gamliel is the Reisha, then I understand that Rabbi Yoshua is the one who says Umode. El Yamris Lo Iri Rabban Gamliel B'Mode Rabbi Yoshua Laman Mode. If the Reisha is not really Rabban Gamliel, then who is Rabbi Yoshua arguing against where he says Umode Rabbi Yoshua? That's not possible. So says the Gemara, therefore it must be that the Reisha of our Mishnah is Rabban Gamliel. The Gemara says, Mi Savris, Rabbi Yoshua, a high pirkin koi? When Rabbi Yoshua is talking about his din, 3 lines from the bottom of the page on Tesvav Amud Aleph in the Mishnah, when he says Umode Rabbi Yoshua, you think he's talking about our parak? He's not talking about our parak. He's talking about Amigu koi, the migu from the previous parak, Ve'apirkin kama koi. What was the migu that we had said? That if a woman makes a certain claim that she was violated after she was married, she could have always said mukas eitz. That was a great migu. And there, Rabbi Yoshua was agreeing. So says the Gemara, Ahaya. What exact case were we talking about in the previous parak that maybe Rabbi Yoshua was highlighting in our Mishnah? Ilema aha. If you want to say it's talking about the case that we learned yesterday, I think, maybe a couple of days ago, that Haisa Me'uberes, that if a woman was pregnant, and they said, who's the father of this child? What's the nature of this baby? And she responds, Me'ish Ploni v'Kohen, who from this guy, and the baby is a Kohen. Doesn't mean he's a Kohen, just means he's a kosher. So there, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Lazar, Omer Ne'emenes, Rabbi Yoshua, Omer Lomi Pia Anuchayin. So there, says the Gemara, Hasa Mai Migu Ika, Hare Krisa Ben Shineha. Her stomach is between her teeth, which is a metaphor for saying, hello, we know she slept with someone. She's pregnant. We don't believe in immaculate conception. So it says the Gemara, that can't be the case where there's a migu. There is no migu in that case. There's no other claim. What's she going to say she's pregnant? You can't say that you didn't sleep with someone when you're pregnant. It says the Gemara, that can't be what the case of Rabbi Yoshua is. So therefore, what case are we talking about? Which our Mishnah here on the bottom of Tezvav Amud Beis is contrasting. A third of the way down on Tezayin, but the Gemara says it must be Ella. Aha. Ra'uha medaberes im echad. We saw she was talking with a man. So says the Gemara, Amru la ma'ativo shal ish zeh. Who is this guy you're talking to? And she responds, Ish ploni v'koinu. He's a kosher yid. Rav Nachman, Rabbi Lazar, Omrim ne'emenes. We believe her to say that she was only alone with him and that she didn't sleep with him. Rabbi Yoshua Omer lomi piano chayin. And there too, Hasam mai migu ika. What was the migu that was in that case? So says the Gemara, I could answer that question. I'll tell you what migu there was. Hanichal is zeiri. Remember, we had a machlokas. What does medaberes mean? Zeiri was of the opinion that medaberes meant nistera, that she was alone with someone. And Ravasi was of the opinion that medaberes was just code word. It was lishna ma'alya, and she actually slept with someone. So hanichal is zeiri da amar mai medaberes nistera. Migu di boy amar lo nivalti. So there, in such a case, in our case, where she would agree that she slept with someone, then she should be believed because she has a migu to say, I never slept with someone. So it says the Gemara, that's great. Ella, the Ravasi damar my medaberes niveles my miguika. There is no migu. You can't say anything less than that. You're saying that medaberes means to sleep with someone. So therefore, there's no migu in that case. Ve'ella, let's try it for the third time. Ve'ella aha. Maybe it's the following case. He omeres mukas eitzani uhu omer loki ela drusas isha. She makes a claim that she's a mukas eitz, that she was injured. And he says, not correct. You were trampled by a man, meaning she was violated. She had tashma shamita. And there too, like we've seen many times, Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Lazar, Omer Ne'emenes, Rabbi Yoshua, Omer Lomi Pianu Chayin. So says the Gemara, in that case where Rabban Gamliel believes her to say she's a mukas eitz, and Rabbi Yoshua says, not correct, we don't believe her. Hasam mai migu ika. We saw this yesterday as well, that according to Rabbi Lazar, that the core machlokes between these two Tanaim, between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua, is whether or not we're talking about dropping her money from a mana to velo klum, from 100 to 0. There, migu di baya amras mukas etani tachtich ve'islam asayim. There's a migu that you should trust me that I'm at 100 because I could have lied and made 200. I could have lied and says I was a mukas eitz. V'kamer meikara de les la'lamana mehemna. So then when she's making a claim that would only leave her with 100, we believe her. Ela the Rabbi Yochanan to Amar b'masai mumana. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the core machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua is about the difference between a ksuba of 200 versus 100. My miguika. Then there would be no migu in that case because they're talking about the same dollar amount. Ela aha. Now let's get to just one last case here. Ela aha. What are we talking about? What is the case? Rabbi Yoshua is contrasting. A man marries a woman and they're together that first night and he doesn't find the basulim. She says, after we got engaged, I was violated, and you're tough luck. When we got engaged, I was in perfect shape. Right after that, she was violated, and just tough luck for you. And in that case, what had we seen a couple of blot ago? We saw that Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Lazar Omer, Menes, Rabbi Shomer, Lomi Pianu Chayin, Demigo di Iboya Amra Mukas Eitani Tachtich, Deloka Pasta Nafshamikahuna. We believe her. Rabbi Yoshua says that there is a migu in this case, which is that she could have said that she's a mukas eitz. And then she said that she was violated, which does preclude her from marrying a Kohen. That's why Rabban Gamliel believes her. I agree with the mukas eitz migu. I agree that if a woman was saying ne'enasti, that she was violated after she got engaged, we believe her because she could have had a better claim of mukas eitz. But behahu migu dehasam peligna ilavach. But I don't agree with the other migu that we were talking about in our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, Michti, who cares? I don't understand, Rabbi Yeshua. Why are you distinguishing between one migu and the next? Says the Gemara, Michti, hai migu v'hai migu. Maishna hai migu mihai migu. A migu is a migu. Once you're able to say, I could have claimed a better claim and I didn't claim it, trust me, I'm telling the truth. Who cares you're splitting hairs now. A migu should always work. So says the Gemara, hacha ein shor shachot lefanecha. Here, there's nothing shechted in front of you. This is talking about our Mishnah here, about the field. That's what Rabbi Yeshua is talking about. Rabbi Yeshua says in regards to the field, he never had to say anything. He never had to say anything at all. Ein shor shachot lefanecha. There's nothing in front of you slaughtered. There's nothing obvious about what's going on here. When he said shor shachot lefanecha, when he said that field belonged to your father, he really could have said nothing and no one would have ever been the wiser. Hasam, but in the other case, harei shor shachot lefanecha lemaisa, she has no basulim. There, we need to respond to something. So Rabbi Yeshua's distinction is that when the migu is responding to something, that's different than when the migu is not responding to something. And we're going to be stopping right here, 4 lines from the bottom at the word v'kevan. We'll pick up on Shabbos an hour before Mincha and learn the balance of this daf and the next one, Yud Zayin. Wishing you all a beautiful night.